Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when the nights were longer, colder, and absolutely unforgiving. Imagine waking up to the sound of a frozen wind clawing through wooden shutters, your breath puffing in the dim light like a ghost escaping your lips. Outside, the snow is deep, up to your knees, and inside, it's only slightly warmer. Welcome to medieval Europe, where winter isn't just a season, it's a test of whether you'll survive until spring. The truth? You probably wouldn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I want to picture your part of the world while we drift off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the snow, the icy crust crunching beneath your rough leather shoes, hand-stitched, no insulation, and thoroughly soaked through. Your home is ahead, a squat, one-room stone hut with a low thatched roof. It sits like a lumpy bread roll in a white sea, smoke trickling lazily from a hole in the ceiling. You push the wooden door open. It groans, because of course it does, and the warmth that greets you is more illusion than comfort. A tiny fire flickers in the hearth, fed by smoky peat or dried animal dung. You inhale, and your lungs fill with something between a barn and a campfire. This is normal. The walls are thick, made of wattle and daub if you're lucky, cold stone if you're not, and the roof leaks from yesterday's sleet. You duck under a hanging side of pork, already mostly frozen, and try not to knock over the bundle of dried herbs that serve both as medicine and air freshener. It's not just you here. Your entire family crowds the space. Your partner, your children, maybe your old mother who hasn't spoken since the last frost. And in the corner, a pig, fat, warm, alive. Because the pig, believe it or not, is helping heat your home. The air inside the hut is damp, heavy with the breath of 7 living beings and one very opinionated chicken. Your only window is a piece of oiled parchment, cloudy and useless. The light outside fades early in winter, and your world shrinks with it. Darkness becomes a second skin. You can't waste firewood. There's almost none left. So the hearth burns low. You layer on cloaks and wraps. If you're very lucky, you've got an old woolen tunic passed down from your grandfather, stiff from years of smoke and sweat. Most peasants had 1 or 2 outfits at most, and you sleep in what you wore all day. Your neighbor's hut isn't any better. You remember last year when their roof collapsed under a snow load. No one had nails or spare beams, so everyone in the village helped patch it with straw, sticks, and the hope it wouldn't happen again. Historians still argue whether most peasant homes had any kind of chimney, or if smoke just pooled under the ceiling, eventually seeping through the thatch. Either way, your eyes burn constantly, and everything you own smells like smoked mud. You lean over the fire, hands outstretched, and notice your fingers, cracked, red, and thick with grime. No one washes much in winter. It's too cold, and the water's frozen. You scratch your scalp and make a mental note to deal with the lice again. Or not. Outside, the snow keeps falling. You listen for wolves, for the wind, for the creak of someone sneaking by. Bandits don't stop working in winter. Neither do desperate neighbors. You remember hearing about snow houses, makeshift shelters peasants built when their homes burned down or collapsed. Just piles of snow and straw pressed into caves. You were little then, but you still remember the woman who slept in one with her baby. The baby didn't make it. The woman might have. Inside, your world shrinks further. The only thing to do after sundown is talk, work wool, repair tools, or tell stories. No books, no candlelight, just gossip, prayer, and tales of winter demons who steal your breath if you sleep facing the wrong direction. It's easy to believe those tales when you see your breath fog the air like a phantom. Some say the cold itself is alive, that it creeps, settles, and waits. The roof groans. A drip lands on your shoulder. Somewhere behind you, the pig farts softly, and the air takes a turn. You laugh. It's the kind of laugh people use to keep from crying, because you know it's only December, and this winter will last until April, if you're lucky. But then again, you've survived before. You know how to layer straw beneath the bedding, how to plug drafts with rags, how to spoon your children like stacked firewood for warmth. You've seen winters break stronger men than you, but also seen laughter at the darkest hour, seen babies born in mid-February, steaming into life while the snow piled against the door. You sit back and listen to the wind. The thatch flutters. You wake stiff, curled like a comma beneath a pile of straw, wool scraps, and your youngest child's foot jammed against your hip. The fire died hours ago, leaving only a soft bed of embers barely warm enough to coax your fingers out from under the covers. Your breath fogs the air again. Same ghost, new morning. Time to get dressed. Not that you ever really undressed. Sleeping in your clothes is standard. But layering up is your next line of defense, and the medieval peasant lookbook offers limited options: linen, wool, and whatever your aunt sewed from an old sack. Fashion isn't the goal here. Survival is. Your first layer is linen, stiff and patched, often home-woven from flax, when you had time to harvest and spin it, which was probably last summer. It's not warm, but it gives your scratchy wool outer layers something to cling to that isn't your skin. The wool is next, itchy, heavy, and probably still damp in spots from yesterday's snow. You pull it on anyway. Socks? If you're lucky. Foot wraps are more likely, strips of old fabric tied around your feet like sad presents. Boots are thick leather, cracked at the seams and lined with straw. You stuff more straw in for insulation, then stomp your feet like you're trying to wake them up from the dead. You wrap a hooded cloak around your shoulders, then maybe a second tunic if you've got one. Belts, cords, and layers of cloth are tied around your waist like some medieval burrito. Movement becomes a waddle. Historians still argue whether peasants routinely owned gloves or just wrapped their hands in rags. You go with the rags. Fingerless, grimy, and mostly symbolic at this point. You flex your fingers and pray they don't go numb before breakfast. You look around. The rest of your family is doing the same thing. Wrapping, layering, tucking, and occasionally muttering about who took whose belt. Kids wear scaled-down versions of adult clothes, often the same ones every day. Babies are wrapped like cabbages, and usually worn like accessories under cloaks or slings. A fringe theory says some peasants would grease their exposed skin with animal fat in winter, sealing in body heat and blocking out cold wind. You try not to imagine rubbing bacon drippings on your cheeks before heading outside. Still, there's a strange comfort in the ritual of dressing. Each layer is a memory. Your sister's old shawl, your father's patched wool cap, that lopsided mitten someone bartered for half a sack of turnips. These aren't just clothes, they're survival stories. And once you're dressed, there's the hat. Always the hat. Heat escapes through your head, or so the village elder insists. And whether that's scientifically true or not, you're not about to argue in this weather. Your hat is thick felt, smells vaguely of goat, and once belonged to someone named Bertram who died in last year's blizzard. You try not to think about that. You step outside into the blinding white. The sun's barely up, but the snow reflects enough light to sting your eyes. You blink, shuffle forward, and the cold stabs into your nostrils like needles. You sniff and tuck your chin into your collar. The road is packed snow, uneven and slippery. You see the boot prints of neighbors heading out early, some to the woods, some to the manor, some just pacing for warmth. You pass a woman in a cloak layered with what looks like burlap and fur scraps. She nods. You nod. No one wants to waste breath talking. A gust of wind whips through the trees, dragging flakes sideways. Your cloak billows, but you hold it tight with your raw-knuckled hands. Your eyes water. The wind finds every gap in your clothing like it was invited. You reach the animal shelter, a low, squat extension of your hut, where you keep your more fragile beasts. The cow moos as you enter, her breath curling in the frosty air like steam from a boiling pot. She's warm, solid, and somehow smells less offensive in winter. You press your hand against her flank. It's the closest thing you'll get to a hug today. Quirky fact of the day? In some regions, peasants would actually wear clothes that hadn't been fully washed, believing the leftover lanolin and sweat helped insulate better. And yes, it absolutely stank. You scrape the frozen dung out with a crude wooden shovel, breaking through the crust like digging for treasure, if treasure were brown and steaming. The floor is strewn with hay, frozen solid in places. You make a mental note to add more later, if you can spare it. Back inside, your family starts preparing a meal, or what passes for one. You strip off your outer cloak and sit close to the hearth again, your wool steaming gently. The layers are itchy, yes, cramped, yes, but they work. You're still here, still breathing. And maybe that's the best thing about these layers. They're armor, not just against the cold, but against hopelessness. Every wrap, every frayed hem is proof that someone, somewhere, refused to give up last winter. Now it's your turn. You wake before dawn this time, not from the cold, but from the smell. A thick, earthy smoke has filled the hut again. The fire's down to embers, choking and smoldering as last night's dung patty burns itself into nothingness. You cough into the crook of your arm. No one's sleeping peacefully. Everyone's breathing in the same stale air, sweet with smoke and sour with sweat. You throw back your covers and crawl toward the hearth. Your knees crack, your joints protest, and your breath puffs out with each movement. Time to bring the fire back to life. Except you don't have firewood. Not real firewood. Just damp twigs, a few hunks of peat, and another slab of dried cow dung from the stack near the door. This is your reality. Fire without firewood. Woods for the rich, or for those lucky enough to live near an accessible forest. But you're a peasant. Forest rights belong to the Lord, and collecting firewood without permission means a fine, or worse. Historians still argue whether lords enforced these laws strictly or turned a blind eye in winter. You don't take chances. You stack a few twigs, nestle the dung on top, and coax the embers with your breath. Your face is right in the smoke now, tears running down your cheeks. Your lips crack. You curse quietly, then catch yourself. Your mother swats at curses, even in winter. Eventually, the fire sputters back to life. Weak, smoky, but alive. You stretch your hands out, grateful for the minimal warmth it gives. Heat is a luxury. Even smoke is a kind of comfort. You've come to associate it with survival. If your hut smells like burning dung, at least it means you're not frozen solid. Cow dung, by the way, is the MVP of the peasant fire. You collect it all summer, shape it into flat discs, and dry them in the sun. In winter, it burns slow and steady, if you can tolerate the smell. Some folks mix in straw or leaves to make cakes that last longer, though they smoke worse. A fringe theory suggests that dung smoke may have helped keep away some parasites. Doesn't help your lungs much, though. If you're near marshy land, you've got peat. You cut it in autumn. Big brown bricks from the earth, stacked like loaves and dried over weeks. Peat burns longer than wood and has a particular scent, rich and mossy. You always knew which neighbors had peat by the smell coming from their chimneys. You remember your friend John, who once tried to burn green wood in desperation. The whole hut filled with black smoke. The fire hissed angrily, and nothing got warm. He coughed for weeks after that. You learned your lesson watching him hack up lungfuls of regret. Sometimes, in the early morning gloom, you can hear your neighbors breaking ice in their buckets, hauling water inside. Some of them throw it over last night's embers just to be sure everything's out. Fires may keep you alive, but they also love to betray you. Every winter, someone's hut goes up in flames. A spark hits a reed mat. A child kicks over a coal. A drunk knocks over a candle stub. And just like that, everything's gone. You've seen it. Whole families out in the snow, wrapped in nothing but a blanket and grief. You add another dung patty to the fire and shuffle back to the wall. The heat is pitiful. It reaches only your fingers. Your toes are still blocks of ice, even inside your boots. You've heard of people sleeping with hot stones wrapped in cloth, heated in the fire and tucked under bedding. You tried it once. Burned a hole straight through your only blanket. Never again. Still, heat's not the only reason you keep the fire going. It gives light. Just enough to see your food, your tools, or your children's faces. Without it, you'd live in complete darkness 18 hours a day. You try to ration it. Light it only when absolutely needed. Mornings, meals, mending clothes, and sometimes, when the snow turns the world outside into a quiet white tomb, you let the fire burn just to remember you're still alive. You glance up at the smoke hole in the ceiling. No chimney, just a gap in the thatch. The smoke coils upward, slow and lazy, leaking out bit by bit. Everything in the hut is stained a smoky brown. The rafters drip with tar. You wipe a soot streak from your forehead with the back of your hand. No one escapes this. You once met a woman whose newborn hadn't seen daylight in a week because they kept the hut sealed tight to conserve heat. The child's eyes teared up constantly, but they said it was better than risking the cold. It's easy to feel like you're living inside the fire rather than beside it. Everything smells like it. Everything tastes like it. Even your dreams flicker with it. Sometimes, when you step outside and the wind bites your cheeks, you actually miss the smoke. You miss the way it hugs your skin, even as it chokes you. You add one more patty to the fire. The flames catch. You sit back and feel the faintest hint of warmth nudge your shins. It's not much, but it's enough to get you through the next hour. And really, that's all winter is, 1 hour at a time. The cold doesn't care that you're hungry. It doesn't make exceptions or offer grace periods. But your stomach does. After a while, the growling becomes a dull ache, then just a background hum. Winter meals are an exercise in creativity, endurance, and hope. And by hope, I mean hoping that old turnip at the bottom of the barrel hasn't sprouted teeth and started a rebellion. You shuffle over to your food storage, a small wooden chest near the wall, covered in blankets and straw to keep it from freezing solid. You lift the lid, breath held like you're opening a box of secrets. Inside? Dried beans, a few root vegetables, maybe a slab of salt pork from the fall slaughter. A miracle. If you're lucky, you've got a cabbage, pale, wizened, but still holding on like the last guest at a terrible party. Cabbage is one of your best friends in winter. It stores well, doesn't mind the cold, and only gets a little smellier each week. A charming dinner guest, really. You pull a handful of beans, a slice of pork, and the cabbage, and head toward the pot hanging over the hearth. It's blackened with soot, the same pot you use for every meal. Soup, stew, porridge, tea, it all happens in one place. You add snow for water. Yes, snow. Because the village well is frozen over, and no one's going to pickaxe it open until after chores. The fire groans as it accepts the pot. Steam rises. The pork starts to sweat grease, giving everything that meaty flavor you haven't tasted in days. You breathe in deeply. Your stomach tightens with excitement, and maybe just a little caution. Last time you rushed your meal, you cracked a tooth on a frozen lentil. In winter, food isn't just sustenance. It's a lifeline to autumn. You eat what you preserved months ago, what you smoked, dried, salted, or pickled. Fresh food? Forget it. Unless you have animals, and even they stop producing much. The hens barely lay. The cow gives less milk every day. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had enough to eat through winter. Records show that some villages made it through on stored grains and salted meat, while others suffered what's known as the lean months, February and March, when everything ran out. You remember last March, you chewed bark and drank hot water with onion peel. Not soup, just onion-flavored water. A quirky survival tip you once heard from an old monk? Eat mice, not raw, roasted. They're small, plentiful, and not the worst thing you've ever tasted. You've never tried it. Yet. You stir the pot and taste a spoonful. Salty, warming, almost good. The beans are still firm, the cabbage limp and stringy. You'd call it a stew if you were feeling generous. If someone served this at a modern dinner party, they'd be arrested. But tonight, it's a feast. You portion it carefully. Everyone gets a bowl. The children eat first. Their faces light up. Not because it's delicious, but because it's warm. That warmth moves from their hands to their bellies to their eyes. You watch them eat and let yourself smile just a little. Bread? Ha, maybe. If there's flour, and if the last of the sourdough starter hasn't died of frostbite. But baking in winter's a luxury, not a routine. Fuel is precious. You once baked 6 loaves and burned enough firewood to lose a whole day's warmth. Instead, you soak old bread in broth. It softens, it swells, it pretends to be new again. Later in the day, you might nibble dried apples or a strip of jerky. Preserved foods are treasures. You keep them hidden behind pots and under straw. Not from thieves, but from the temptation to eat everything at once. You remember your cousin, ate all her family's cheese in 1 week, thinking more would come. It didn't. They had to boil hay by February. You look at your pot. There's enough left for tomorrow, maybe. You hide it in the coldest corner of the hut and hope no one tips it over in the night. And then there's the ale. Weak, home-brewed, but surprisingly nutritious. In some villages, it's safer than water and thicker than soup. You drink it warm, if you're lucky, and often with your meals. It dulls the hunger, warms the belly, and keeps spirits from diving too low. You sip now, letting the mild bitterness sit on your tongue. For a moment, the world softens. Outside, the wind howls again. You hear a dog bark, distant and sharp. Someone's shouting, probably about stolen potatoes. Again, you wrap your hands around your wooden bowl and lick the last of the stew from the rim. Nothing wasted. Every drop matters. Every meal is a small victory, a declaration to the cold. Not today. Your belly's not full, but it's no longer crying. You lean back against the wall, hands on your stomach, and sigh. You made it through another meal. Another meal means another day. And in winter, days are the only currency that matters. Your breath curls in the air like ribbon as you step outside, bowl in hand, licking the last bit of broth from your fingers. The air is sharp, colder than it was an hour ago, and somehow heavier, like it's settling on your shoulders just to remind you who's in charge. Winter doesn't just want to freeze you. It wants to keep you busy. You scan the yard. Snow crunches beneath your boots, thick and crusted. Your body groans like the old barn door you're about to open. The animals need feeding. You'd trade your socks for an extra pair of hands, but you only have your own, and they're already stiff. The goat bleats indignantly. You think she's glaring at you. Maybe she is. You reach for the hay fork and jab at the frozen pile. Feeding animals in winter is like negotiating with divas. The cow snorts. She gets the better stuff. Last autumn's dried grasses. The goat will eat anything, including your hat if you stand too close. The chickens? You toss a handful of grain and watch them strut like nobles. One pecks your boot. Rude. You murmur to them as you work. Nonsense words, really. But it keeps your mind from wandering to how cold your toes are. A fringe belief says talking to animals keeps them healthier. You've heard worse advice. Historians still argue whether peasants prioritized animal care out of love, superstition, or pure survival instinct. Likely, it was all three. These creatures are your lifelines. Without them, you don't get eggs, milk, or meat. You certainly don't get manure for the garden, or warmth from a cow pressed against your wall. You break the ice on the water trough with the back of an axe. Chunks float. You scoop them out and replace the frozen mess with snow, hoping it'll melt enough to slake their thirst. Your breath fogs with effort. And then there's the barn. It's not much. Just a lean-to slapped together with leftover timber and thatch. It blocks wind, holds warmth. You've shared it before. On the coldest nights, the whole family crowded in with the livestock like some bizarre holiday reunion. The cow snores. Your uncle does too. You're not sure who's louder. You recall last winter's blizzard. The wind howled so hard it tore the thatch clean off. You spent 3 days huddled inside the hut with the pig, praying the fire wouldn't go out. When it finally passed, the yard was a white ocean. You found your rake frozen upright, like it had tried to escape. There's always a chore list in your head. Shovel the roof, clear the path, chop what little wood you're allowed, check the fences for storm damage. Even snow has to be managed. Let it pile too high, and it collapses your roof or traps the animals. Let it melt and refreeze, and you're skating your way to the outhouse. Speaking of which, yes, that delightful little shack beyond the tree line. In summer, it's a nuisance. In winter, it's your Everest. You put it off until the very last moment, muttering to yourself the whole way there. It's dark. It's freezing. The seat is a death trap. You've learned to hover like a frightened squirrel. You've also learned how to avoid making the trip too often. You eat less. You drink less. You hold it more than is probably healthy. But dignity in a medieval winter is a relative concept. Back in the yard, you notice the snow is falling again. Soft, lazy flakes this time. You stop to watch them land on your sleeve, delicate and individual. It's almost beautiful if you ignore the fact that you're freezing and smell like goat. You catch yourself smiling, then coughing. The cold does that, makes your lungs feel like cracked leather. But you still smile. Because something about seeing your animals fed, the roof still standing, and the children poking their heads out the door makes this life feel, dare you say, manageable. You call out to your oldest, handing them the hay fork. They grumble, but take it. Chores are shared, always. If you're old enough to stand, you're old enough to carry water or sweep the floor. Medieval parenting. Motivational speeches not included. And then there's the little acts of cleverness, the workarounds. You remember burying carrots in dry sand in the cellar to keep them from freezing, hanging sausages from rafters in a muslin sack so the rats wouldn't reach them, sleeping with the dog at your feet for warmth. There's no guidebook, just experience and desperation. You step inside again, shedding snow from your cloak like a wet dog. The fire is burning brighter now, and the room smells like stew and smoke and wool. The good things, the safe things. You think about summer, about the warm earth, the sun on your back, the sweat running into your eyes. You miss sweating. You even miss the flies. Kind of. But winter has its rhythm. You've learned it. You respect it. It wakes you early, keeps your hands busy, and never once lets you feel like you've done enough. Because that's the secret no one tells you. Surviving winter isn't a battle. It's a performance. And you? You're dancing with the cold, shuffling, stomping, sliding your way through each day like a clumsy, frost-bitten ballerina. The audience? Just the wind, and maybe your grumpy goat. But so far you haven't fallen. Your fingers are raw and numb from the cold. But there's no time to rest. It's mending day. Or rather, it's everything is falling apart, so let's try not to freeze day. Your clothes, your tools, your dignity, everything needs patching up this time of year. You sit by the fire, holding a shirt so thin in places you could read through it. And no, you're not joking. You thread a needle with stiff, clumsy hands. The thread is coarse, spun from flax last summer, and it breaks if you pull too hard. You've done this so many times the needle feels like part of your hand now, like an extra finger you never asked for. Every stitch is crooked, but who's going to judge you? Your pig? You tug the shirt closer, patching over a hole at the elbow. Again. It's your third time fixing this spot. The fabric has the texture of dry leaves now. You think about just cutting off the sleeves entirely. Medieval fashion meets desperation couture. Historians still argue whether most peasants had more than one change of clothing. Some say yes, simple tunics for daily wear, a slightly less ragged one for church. Others insist most folks wore the same set until it basically walked off on its own. You lean toward the latter, especially in winter. Your own tunic? It's a patchwork mosaic of stains, tears, and last year's repairs. One sleeve hangs a little longer than the other, like it's trying to sneak away. You're wearing wool leggings under it, but they have holes in places you'd rather not discuss. Cold finds those holes with a mean sort of precision. Still, you make do. That's the rule of winter. Make do or be done for. Beside you, your child is untangling yarn from an old sock. Not for fun. You're unraveling it to reuse. That sock's been through 3 sets of toes already. You might try to knit it into mittens, though you only half remember how. You once heard of a woman who made mittens from rat pelts. You hope that's an exaggeration. Then again, depends on the rat. You pull out your leather shoes next. They're stiff as bark. You massage them by the fire, hoping the heat softens them enough to be wearable. The soles are thinning. You think about the scrap of oxhide hidden under the straw mattress. It's your secret treasure. You're saving it to resole the shoes, if your fingers don't fall off first. You patch a hole in the heel with waxed thread. It's ugly. It holds. That's the goal. Your tools need attention too. You lay out a dull knife, a rusting hoe blade, and your wooden spoon, the one you've eaten every winter meal with since you were 10. You sharpen the knife with a whetstone, slow and careful. You can't afford mistakes. You once sliced your thumb open doing this and bled all over the stew. Family still brings it up. A quirky little tradition in your village. Naming your tools. Your knife's called Biter. Your spoon? Lixie. You're not proud of that one. But in winter, even silliness can keep you sane. You repair a crack in your child's wooden clogs next, stuffing moss into the split and binding it with thin twine. You say it's temporary. They know better. Temporary means until April. Or later. And then there's the blankets. You've already sewn 3 together this winter to create the super blanket. It's heavy enough to trap dreams and smells like old sheep. Still, it does the job. You patch another blanket, your needle snagging on clumps of wool. Some families add straw between layers to improve insulation. You tried that once. It worked, until the mice found it. Now you just double layer and pray. Why don't we just get new ones? your youngest once asked, eyes wide. You laughed so hard you wheezed. Then you explained how buying a new blanket costs more than the average peasant earns in a month. They didn't ask again. You glance at the corner where your sewing kit lives. A wooden box with bone needles, coarse thread, bits of hide, and a thimble made from hammered tin. One of your most precious possessions. You'd trade a dozen chickens for it. Maybe even the goat. Okay, not the goat. Repairs stretch into hours. You lose yourself in the rhythm of it. Stitch, knot, sigh. Stitch, knot, mutter. It's slow and the fire's low, and the smoke's making your eyes itch again. But you feel something in the stillness. Accomplishment? Maybe. Or just not being frozen. Your neighbors are probably doing the same right now. You picture old Marit down the lane, muttering at her husband's breeches like they insulted her honor. Or the village blacksmith, trying to make new nails from twisted scrap because nobody's hauling iron in this weather. It's weirdly comforting to know that everyone else is just barely holding it together too. You finish the last stitch on your shirt and hold it up. It's lopsided, but whole. You'll wear it tomorrow, and it might even keep the wind off, unless the wind finds that sneaky hole under your armpit again. You gather up your tools, now just slightly sharper, your clothes just slightly warmer, and your dignity mostly intact. That's a good winter day. You blow out the candle stub, one of your last, and settle back near the hearth, watching the snow thicken outside. Your hands are sore, your eyes are tired, but everything you patched today is a little more ready for tomorrow. And tomorrow? Tomorrow always comes wearing frost. The wind rattles the shutters like it's trying to claw its way in, but you're not listening. You're too busy hauling your bones up into the loft again. No, not for a nap, though that does sound heavenly, but to check your precious winter insulation, the thatch stuffed under the roofline. The draft is back. You knew it would be. It always finds a way, slinking in through gaps like a ghost with unfinished business. You crawl along the low beam, squinting into shadowy crevices, your fingers probing for trouble. A few tufts of straw have fallen out. Typical. You plug them back in with a grunt and add a handful of moss for good measure. It's like trying to fix a leaky boat with bread dough. You're not just playing house. This is about survival. Keeping heat inside is an art form in winter, and your hut is the canvas, albeit one that keeps smudging the paint. Thatched roofs were common for peasants like you. Light, cheap, and easy to repair with a sickle and patience. But insulation? That was where you got creative, stuffing the walls with straw, moss, reeds, anything dry and not currently being eaten by bugs. Historians still argue whether most peasant homes were insulated deliberately or just became that way through sheer filth and packed-in bodies. Honestly, it's probably a bit of both. You've swept this place once since November, and that was only because someone spilled porridge and it started attracting beetles. Back on the ground, you pull your cloak tighter and eye the floor. Packed dirt, smoothed by countless footsteps. You've added rushes for warmth. Fresh in summer, now brittle and sharp. Every step is a crunchy reminder that you're not living in a palace. But it does the job. You layer straw beneath, maybe even tuck in dried herbs if you're feeling fancy. Not just for the smell. Some say mint keeps away mice. You're not sure it works, but it's nice to pretend. You shuffle to the door and inspect the gaps. That bottom corner is the worst. It howls when the wind is right. You shove a folded bit of linen into the crack. It's one of your old shirts, the one with the permanent soup stain shaped like France. The fire is your main defense. It crackles stubbornly in the hearth, spitting sparks now and then like it's got opinions. You feed it constantly, twigs, sticks, anything that burns without exploding. Proper firewood is precious. You ration it like gold. That one log might last a day, if you're careful. You remember when you ran out of firewood last February and had to burn an old stool. You cried a little. Not because of sentimentality, but because it was your only chair. Tonight, you've got just enough kindling to keep things warmish. You stack it near the hearth, drying out damp bits near the flame. The dog curls beside it, snoring. Smartest member of the house. A quirky trick from your neighbor, heating stones in the fire and wrapping them in cloth to put under the blankets. A medieval hot water bottle, minus the water. It works, if you don't burn your foot. You've done that twice. You glance at the window. Just an oiled cloth stretched over a wooden frame. Glass? That's for the church. You patch a tear with wax and a prayer. Outside it's snowing sideways. Again. And that's the thing about winter air. It gets in. No matter what you do, it finds the holes. Through the roof, the floor, the walls, the chimney. There's no such thing as a sealed home when your insulation is basically compost. Still, you fight back. You hang old blankets over the door, drape cloaks over the bed, wear your hat inside. Everyone does. It's not weird. It's survival chic. You double-check the sleeping corner. Straw mattresses, layered with pelts and every blanket you own. Your children are already under the pile, only their noses peeking out. They look like furry potatoes. You envy them. You climb in next, burrowing deep. It takes a full minute before the warmth of the bed seeps into your bones. You pull your cloak over your shoulders and sigh. The wind whistles outside, but in here, it's tolerable. Not warm. Never warm. But tolerable. You whisper a little charm before sleep. A line your grandmother used to say. Frost at the gate, but fire at the heart. You're not sure it means anything, but it helps. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Check the roof, seal the drafts, scrape ice from the inside of your water pot. But for now, you're wrapped in every scrap of cloth you own, tucked into a mattress that smells like hay and goat, staring at a ceiling held together by stubbornness and soot. And you feel okay, because surviving winter isn't about comfort. It's about defiance. And right now, wrapped in patched wool and mouse-proofed moss, you're still winning. Morning arrives not with sunshine, but with smoke. Your eyes blink open to the faint haze of last night's fire curling around the rafters. It tickles your throat, makes you cough. A rough winter bark you've come to recognize in everyone. The fire's mostly embers now, glowing faintly under a crust of ash, like it too would rather not get up. But you do. Slowly, achy, stiff. You swing your legs out from the blankets and wince as your feet hit the floor. Cold as river stones. There's no such thing as a gentle morning in a medieval winter. You're always waking up in a battle. Today's mission. Food. Specifically, food that hasn't frozen solid or spoiled. Easy, right? You start with the root cellar. It's out back, a few steps from the house, just far enough to make you question your choices. You wrap yourself in every layer available. Cloak, scarf, hat that used to belong to your uncle and smells like onions. Then you brace yourself and step out. The air slices at you like a grumpy butcher. You crunch through snowdrifts as high as your knees. You should have cleared this path yesterday, but yesterday you were too busy making soup from turnip peels and regret. The cellar is a dugout hole covered by a wooden hatch, partially hidden under snow, and, apparently, a stubborn chicken. You shoo her away with mild insults. She squawks something impolite and stomps off. Classic Hilda. You yank open the hatch. The smell hits you. Earthy, musty, with a side of mildew. But it's also the smell of hope. Because what's inside determines how well fed, or how creatively hungry, you'll be today. Down the ladder you go. It's dim and cool, but not freezing. Exactly why this pit is your food bank. You run your fingers over the rows of stored goods. Wrinkled carrots, parsnips like small clubs, potatoes with eyes that seem to stare at you accusingly. These are your winter staples. Not glamorous, but dependable. You pull out a cabbage. It's rubbery and smells like farts, which means it's in prime condition. You find a sack of beans, too. Small, hard pebbles that soften up nicely in a stew if you soak them long enough. Like, say, a week. A jar of sauerkraut waits on a high shelf. You eye it warily. Fermented food is nutritious and keeps well, but there's always the risk of it turning on you. That one time it exploded? You're still scrubbing brine from the ceiling beams. Historians still argue whether most peasants ate well enough to survive the long winters. Some say yes, thanks to preserved produce, salted meat, and hearty grains. Others point out that many simply starved slowly, their food stretched thinner than their patience. You fall somewhere in the middle. Some days you eat, some days you chew hope. Preservation is your silent partner in this season. You've pickled turnips in brine, smoked eel over alderwood, dried apples strung like beads across the hearth. You've salted pork and buried it in a clay pot, then prayed it wouldn't rot before February. Nothing gets wasted, not even onion skins. They go into broth. Not even bones. They get boiled, twice if needed. You drag your haul back inside, cheeks stinging red. The fire's been rekindled by someone smarter and quicker than you. Probably your eldest, already stirring the pot hung over the flames. You nod your thanks, dump your cabbage on the table, and start slicing. Food prep is an orchestra of monotony. Chop, stir, mutter, taste, scowl. You throw in barley from a clay jar, some dried herbs, thyme if you're lucky, mystery leaf if you're not, a pinch of salt traded for last summer's eggs, and water that may or may not have come from a clean bucket. No one dares ask. It smells better than it looks. It always does. A fringe belief circulates through the village that eating garlic wards off winter spirits. You don't believe in spirits, but you eat the garlic anyway, just in case. The younger kids hover nearby, noses twitching. You hand them crusts of bread, hard as bark. They gnaw like mice. Everyone's stomach is a little too empty. That's normal now. There's no dinner bell, no formal seating, no candlelit service. You all eat together around the hearth, wooden bowls clutched close. The stew burns your tongue, and you love it. It's warmth. It's nourishment. It's not frozen. You chew slowly, thinking of next week's meals. You have enough beans and barley to stretch for a bit. Maybe if the weather lets up, you can barter for dried fish with the tanner's wife. She owes you after that lice remedy you gave her last year. Probably shouldn't mention it during negotiations. You'll need to go hunting soon. Well, trapping more likely. Big game is rare this close to winter's gut. But the occasional hare or pigeon can save your supper. You've even considered squirrel. You just haven't yet sunk to that particular culinary low. Yet. You finish your stew, licking the bowl with your bread. Then you pour water into the pot, set it back on the hearth, and let it simmer for tomorrow. This is peasant cuisine at its finest, perpetual stew, topped off endlessly with whatever's left. As you clean up, your mind drifts to festivals. Candlemas is coming soon. Not a food-heavy one, but at least there'll be singing, a candle-lit procession, and maybe a honey cake if someone has hoarded ingredients. You smile at the thought. Even one sweet bite can carry you through another week. You dry your hands on a rag, then tuck the remaining bread away in a linen cloth, high up, away from Hilda the chicken. She's a thief and a menace. And you're a survivor, not by might or magic, but by beans, cabbage, and sheer stubborn resolve. It's hunting day, or at least it's go outside and hope something edible blunders into you day. You wake up before dawn, as always, but this time you've got a plan. Your old snares, a satchel of crushed berries for bait, and a deeply unearned sense of optimism. Your breath ghosts in front of you as you trudge into the woods, the cold seeping in like regret. The snow crunches under your boots, loud enough to scare away anything with ears. You're not exactly a stealth machine in 3 layers of wool and a hat shaped like a muffin. You head for the thickets where rabbits sometimes hide. You've had luck there before, twice in the last 5 years. That's enough to qualify as a hotspot, right? Setting a snare is simple, in theory. Loop the cord, tie it to a bent sapling, disguise it with snow and hope. You crouch, fumbling with cold fingers, muttering the usual charms. Not magic, just habit. Stay tight, stay true. Catch one fat enough to stew. You set 5 snares. Maybe 6 if that last one isn't just a tangle of wishful thinking. You mark them with twigs so you can find them later, because losing a snare in snow is like losing a coin in a river. Historians still argue whether peasants relied heavily on hunting or if it was more of a desperate, last-ditch effort. Officially, most hunting was reserved for nobles, especially big game. If you so much as looked at a deer wrong, you could be fined, whipped, or worse. But smaller animals, hares, birds, the occasional rat, those were fair game, or at least fair enough if nobody caught you. You're no poacher, not officially, but you've definitely eaten meat that walked into a snare with poor decision-making skills. You scan the trees for birds next, no luck. You do see a squirrel, though. It sees you too, and immediately scolds you from a branch. You glare at it, it glares back. Mutual hostility. You move on. There's a pond half frozen nearby. You chip through the edge, hoping for a fish, but only find ice and disappointment. Still, you set a line, tying it to a branch and baiting it with a bit of leftover fat. Long shot, but who knows? Maybe some frostbitten fish is feeling reckless. As you wait, you think about your ancestors. Some say they tracked deer for days, barefoot in the snow, with nothing but a stick and determination. You admire their grit, also their questionable judgment. You head back to check the traps. First one, empty. Second, triggered, but nothing there. You mutter a few words you definitely didn't learn in church. Third trap, jackpot. A small rabbit, still and stiff, caught cleanly. You whisper thanks to the forest, or luck, or whatever force isn't actively trying to starve you. You reset the snare, tuck the rabbit into your cloak, and keep moving. Another trap, another miss. The last one holds something. Not a rabbit. It's a bundle of feathers and attitude. A magpie, alive, furious, and currently shrieking like a noblewoman who stepped in mud. You let it go. Not worth the pecking or the bad luck. On your way back, you hear a rustle near the trees. You freeze. Slowly, you lower yourself, eyes scanning the underbrush. It's a fox. Sleek, red, beautiful, and very much not on today's menu. Not just because it's hard to catch, but because it's seen as a bad omen. Some folks say seeing a fox before dusk means someone you know will lose a toe to frostbite. You nod at the creature and back away. Not today, omen beast. By the time you return home, your hands are stiff, your nose is leaking, and your prize is one rabbit and possibly a cold. But still, that's meat. Real, honest, chewy meat. Your family perks up the moment you enter. You brandish the rabbit like a knight showing off a dragon head. The younger kids are already naming it, which is unfortunate, because it's going into the stew before sundown. You skin it carefully by the hearth, stretching the pelt to dry later. Fur is precious, even rabbit. You might sew it into a glove lining or a child's cap. You scrape the meat clean and toss the bones into the pot with the broth you started yesterday. It smells like hope, like something richer than turnip. You stir slowly, humming an old song about a hunter who caught a bear with his bare hands. You, meanwhile, caught a bunny with some string and the power of spite. Dinner is small but satisfying. Everyone gets a bite or two of meat, and you let the kids gnaw on the bones. There's marrow inside, and besides, biting bones builds character, or so you tell them. As the fire crackles, You think about how hard hunting is in winter. Not just the act itself, but the walking, the waiting, the not freezing while you fail. It's not a solution, it's a gamble. A quirky belief floats around your village that whistling while you hunt will call the spirits of past winters to guide your prey toward you. You tried it once and attracted a very confused goose. Still counts. Tomorrow, you'll check the snares again. You'll keep trying, not because it's fun, not because you're a natural-born tracker, but because a single rabbit can stretch 2 meals if you get creative with barley and lies. For now, you wrap yourself in blankets, the scent of stew still lingering in the air. Outside, the snow keeps falling. The fox might still be watching. But inside, you're warm, you're full, and you're just a little smug. You caught dinner. Winter can wait its turn. The day drags on, and you find yourself staring at the window again. The frosted glass smeared with cold breath and hopelessness. Outside, the snow still falls like the world is stuck in a slow-motion avalanche. Inside, you're stuck in the equally relentless rhythm of survival. Food, fire, water, repeat. Water, though. That's a luxury this time of year. You haven't thought about it much since last week, but it's time to fetch more. You bundle up again. Layers upon layers, until you resemble a walking haystack with eyes. The bucket is wooden, patched with pitch and tied with rope that you hope will hold. This trip is worse than usual because the well is half frozen. You know that story about medieval wells being places of mystery and magic. Some say water there can heal. Others say it's cursed if you draw too fast. Historians still argue whether peasant wells were properly maintained or just muddy holes that doubled as fish ponds for the local kids. You lean toward the latter. You hike down the slope to the well, feeling every icy gust cut through your cloak like a sarcastic little knife. You peer over the edge. The water glimmers darkly below, like a secret you don't want to hear. You lower the bucket slowly, praying it doesn't freeze mid-trip or that you don't drop it into the abyss. The rope groans, the bucket fills, and you haul it back up, lungs burning and fingers numb. Success. Back at the hut, you carefully pour the water into a clay jug, setting it near the fire to thaw any lurking ice. You breathe a small prayer that it doesn't taste like swamp. Water in winter isn't just for drinking. It's for cooking, cleaning, washing, and a few desperate attempts at hygiene. Bathing? Forget it. A quick rinse in a basin is about as close as you get without risking hypothermia. Speaking of hygiene, you think of the snow. It's clean, right? Cold water on the face, maybe? Peasants did use snow for some cleaning, but it's a trade-off between frostbite and dirt. Not exactly a spa day. You look around the hut, feeling the thick layers of soot on the walls, the smell of smoke and old cooking fat hanging heavy. There's no chimney sweeping service here, just a bucket and a brush you wield reluctantly when the smoke gets unbearable. That soot, by the way, had a strange reputation. Some believed it kept away evil spirits or even fleas, which you could definitely use more of a break from. Others thought it was just a sign you were poor and lived in a kitchen more than a home. You ladle some water into a basin, heat it over the fire until it's barely warm, and splash your face. The shock wakes you up better than any rooster. Your hands sting from the cold, and the basin fogs with your breath. Quirky rumor has it that rubbing yourself with animal fat helped keep skin from cracking. It sounds gross, and honestly, it is. But you've tried it when your hands split open, and it actually works better than any fancy cream you've heard about. Your neighbor swears by burying lard pots in the snow to keep them from melting in summer and freezing solid in winter. A preservation hack that probably originated from someone too lazy to cook every day. Back inside, you check the fire. It's fed but tired, flickering like it's about to give up. You poke it to revive the embers, the smell of burning pine needles mixing with the damp earth of the hut. It's an oddly comforting scent. Outside, the wind howls like a pack of wolves. You tighten your cloak around your shoulders, eyes half closed, savoring the moment when the cold isn't clawing at you directly. You sit down and think about the chores still left. Repairing the roof, mending clothes, tending to the animals, assuming the cold hasn't claimed them all. Every task feels monumental in winter's grip. Your fingers itch for the sewing needle, but the cold makes you clumsy. You try anyway, threading a patch onto a worn tunic, feeling the familiar resistance of rough wool under your fingertips. Historians still argue whether peasant clothing was patched repeatedly out of necessity or style. You know your answer. It's definitely necessity, with a dash of pride. You imagine the clothes you'll mend next spring when the thaw arrives, when the world softens, and you might even get to wear something other than layers and patched wool. But for now, winter rules. It's a cold, uncompromising monarch, and you're its persistent subject. Still, in the quiet of the hut, with the fire crackling softly and the dog snoring at your feet, you find a small, stubborn warmth. Not from the fire, not from the blankets, but from knowing you've survived another day. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The night stretches long, the cold sneaking in through every crack and crevice, like a patient thief. You're curled by the hearth, the fire's dying glow casting flickering shadows on the rough wooden walls. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, and the snow presses hard against the windows, like the world is trying to squeeze in and freeze you where you sit. You pull your blankets tighter, savoring the heat where it clings. It's not much, but it's enough. Your thoughts wander, as they tend to do on long winter nights, toward the stories passed down. Some true, some maybe less so. Like the one about the woman who survived by sleeping next to a haystack filled with the smoke of burning herbs, swearing the spirits kept her warm. You don't quite buy it, but if anyone needed a win this winter, it's her. The fire sputters, and you toss on a few twigs, listening to the crackle. Smoke rises in lazy spirals, curling up through the hole in the roof that doubles as a chimney, or at least sort of does. The smoke's always been a problem. Sometimes it makes your eyes sting so bad you feel like you're crying from the inside out. That's winter living, a constant balancing act between warmth and breath. You remember the frostbite on your fingertips last month. It looked like small purple flowers blooming on your skin. Beautiful if you were an evil botanist. You wrapped them in cloth soaked in warm water, but the pain was a lesson. Winter doesn't care about your plans. There's a strange ritual in your village about warming frostbitten hands. You share them with neighbors, gently massaging fingers as you swap stories and grumble about the cold. Community is more than survival. It's the only thing that stops winter from turning your heart to ice. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were more vulnerable to cold diseases or malnutrition during harsh winters. The truth? Probably both. You've heard that scurvy was a silent killer when fresh greens ran out, but there's little written about how often frostbite or pneumonia finished the job. Your breath fogs the air as you speak softly to your family. Mostly whispers, trying not to wake the younger children. You tell them about the time your grandmother claimed a dead man's ghost visited her, warming her toes on a bitter night. You don't believe it exactly, but a little magic feels necessary when the fire's so small. Outside, an owl hoots, a sound both comforting and eerie. It's a reminder that life continues, even when it feels like everything's frozen. You hear the creak of the door and look up. Your eldest returns from a late trip to check traps or gather firewood. They slump inside, cheeks red and dripping icicles, carrying a small bundle of twigs and a bit of hope. You smile, tired but grateful. The night deepens. You tell one more story before sleep pulls you under. A tale about a medieval peasant who outwitted the cold by wrapping himself in goose feathers and riding out a blizzard on a donkey. Ridiculous, yes, but you hold on to the humor. After all, if you're going to freeze, might as well freeze laughing. Sleep is a fragile thing in winter, punctuated by coughing, dreams of summer, and the occasional scurry of mice in the walls. But when it comes, it's deep and necessary. Because tomorrow, you wake to fight the cold all over again. Dawn barely creeps over the horizon when you're already awake, the cold biting your nose as you peel back your blankets. It's that brittle kind of cold that feels like glass under your skin, sharp and unforgiving. You squint into the dim morning light filtering through the frost-coated window, trying to ignore the ache in your joints that winter always brings. The chores begin immediately. You start by feeding the animals, the few hardy creatures who've made it this far into the freeze. Chickens huddle in the coop, feathers puffed up like angry snowballs. The chores begin immediately. You start by feeding the animals, the few hardy creatures who've made it this far into the freeze. Chickens huddle in the coop, feathers puffed up like angry snowballs. You scatter grain, careful not to waste any. In winter, every kernel counts, and the hens aren't laying much these days. The goats, tougher by nature, sniff the air and grunt impatiently. You break chunks of frozen hay into manageable bits, tossing them over the fence. One of them, stubborn as a mule, eyes you suspiciously before giving a reluctant nibble. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants' animals were truly resilient, or if many succumbed quietly during harsh winters. It's likely a bit of both. Some survived because they were bred tough, others because their humans refused to give up. Next up, chopping firewood. You grab your axe, feeling the cold metal handle almost too slick in your numb fingers. The pile outside looks smaller than last year, and you curse yourself for not gathering more before winter's grip tightened. Splitting wood is exhausting but necessary. The fire won't keep going on sticks and hopes alone. You swing with measured force, watching the wood split into smaller pieces. Every chunk feels like a lifeline. A quirky medieval fact? Peasants sometimes used their own urine to start fires. Odd, but the ammonia helped ignite damp wood. You're not eager to try it yourself, but admire the resourcefulness. After stacking the wood inside, you check the roof for ice dams, the crusty, dangerous ridges that can collapse under their own weight. You try to chip away the worst of them, careful not to slip on the frozen tiles. It's hard work, made harder by frozen fingers and the ever-present threat of falling through the fragile roof boards. You remind yourself not to rush. It's a battle of patience, not strength. Inside again, you warm your hands by the fire, watching the flames dance. You slice some hard bread saved from yesterday, scraping butter onto it. The bread is stale but filling, the butter a luxury from the last milking before the goat's production slowed to a trickle. You sip a thin broth, flavored with whatever herbs you managed to dry during the summer. It's not much, but it's warmth you can swallow. Winter survival means mastering the art of making do. Every crumb, every ember, every breath of warm air is precious. A fringe belief says that carrying a piece of iron in your pocket can ward off frostbite. You check your belt pouch where you keep a small iron knife. Maybe it helps, or maybe it's just a comforting superstition. Before heading outside again, you patch a hole in your cloak with a scrap of wool, muttering about how your clothes have seen better decades. Patching is a never-ending task, your second full-time job after keeping the fire alive. The sun finally rises fully, but it brings no warmth, only pale light. You trudge back outside, ready to face the day's chores once more. Winter is relentless. But so are you. The midday light casts long, pale shadows over the snow-covered fields. but the chill never lifts. You stand outside the village church, the one place that offers some warmth and, more importantly, community. Gathering inside is a rare blessing during winter. The stone walls hold heat like a stubborn secret, and the flickering candles chase back the dark corners where cold likes to hide. It's here that you catch whispers of news, barters for goods, and tales of other peasants surviving or perishing just beyond the hill. People shuffle in, cheeks pink from the cold, boots clinking on the stone floor. You trade nods and small smiles, the kind that say, "We're still here, aren't we?" There's comfort in shared suffering. You overhear a debate about whether last winter's famine was worse than this one. Opinions vary wildly. Some blame the weather, others the Lord's taxes. It's a never-ending argument, like whether the chicken or the egg came first, but with grimmer stakes. Historians still argue how much power local lords truly wielded over peasant survival, whether they provided aid or squeezed every last grain from the soil and souls. Today, though, the church feels like a refuge from both cold and authority. The priest reads from a worn manuscript, words murmured with quiet reverence. You catch the scent of incense mixed with burning tallow candles, a heavy sweetness that clings to your clothes. A quirky village superstition floats through the room, that carrying a sprig of holly can keep evil spirits and winter's worst effects at bay. You secretly pocket a bit, hoping it will do more than just smell nice. Outside, after the service, you join a few neighbors trading goods. You offer some preserved root vegetables in exchange for dried herbs or a chunk of cheese. Barter is the lifeblood of winter economy here. Money is scarce, but trade keeps you all afloat. You notice an old man telling stories about winter's cruelty, a tale about a lost caravan frozen solid, with their footprints still etched in the ice like a ghost map. You listen, part fascinated, part glad you're home. On the walk back, you stop by the communal ovens. These massive brick structures were built so villagers could bake bread without each household needing their own fire. Today, the air around the oven is thick with warmth and the smell of baking rye. You wait your turn to toss in dough, careful not to burn your fingers. The smell alone is worth the wait, a reminder of summer's bounty and the hope that spring will come again. Back home, the bread is still warm when you break it. The crust is hard, but the inside soft enough to remind you that warmth isn't just a temperature, it's a feeling. You think about the church, the barter, the stories, all threads in the fabric holding your world together. Winter might be long and merciless, but community is longer still. By mid-afternoon, the cold starts to bite through your layers again, a sneaky chill that finds every gap, every fold, every bare patch of skin you missed. You head back outside, knowing that despite your exhaustion, there's still work to do. Winter waits for no one, and neither does the frost. You trudge to the barn where the animals shelter. Their breath steams in the cold air, misting the barn's wooden beams like tiny clouds trapped inside. You check the water trough, but it's frozen over. A simple but constant winter problem. You break the ice with a wooden stick, careful not to drop it in. The water beneath is murky and cold, but life-giving nonetheless. You recall the old wives' tale that drinking frozen water helps keep you warm inside. Not exactly science, but sometimes comfort comes from belief. The barn smells like hay and manure and the faint metallic tang of animal breath. Familiar, oddly reassuring. You move among the beasts, speaking softly to calm their nerves. Animals feel the cold, too, though they're tougher than you. Or maybe they just accept it better. You gather manure for the fields, an unpleasant but necessary task. Manure was the medieval equivalent of gold for soil fertility. especially after harsh winters when the earth needed every bit of help to wake up come spring. Historians still argue how much peasants relied on animal manure versus other fertilizers. What's clear is that their relationship with the land was intensely practical. Every byproduct had a use. You wheel the manure out carefully, trying not to let it freeze solid on the way. The smell is pungent but life-sustaining. Back inside, you take a moment to warm your hands by the fire, massaging the stiff joints. You remember the quirky belief that rubbing goose grease on sore muscles could ease winter aches. You've tried it once, and while it smelled terrible, the relief was surprisingly real. Your thoughts drift to clothing again. The thick wool tunics, the patched trousers, the ever-present cloak. You consider how layered your outfits are, designed to trap body heat like a medieval sleeping bag. You pull out a bit of leftover sheep's wool and start spinning it into yarn. Spinning and weaving weren't just crafts. They were survival skills. Some say peasant women could spin faster than most men could chop wood, a claim you accept without question. The quiet rhythm of your fingers twisting fiber into thread is oddly soothing, a small rebellion against the cold's relentless pressure. Outside, the light begins to fade, turning the snow a soft shade of purple. You pause at the door, watching your breath hang in the air like smoke. Winter is heavy, but your hands keep working. Because if you stop, even for a moment, the cold might win. The sky darkens faster than you want, shadows creeping in like unwelcome guests. You rush to finish chores before night fully settles. The cold whispers through every crack, reminding you that winter is still very much in control. You check the firewood one last time, making sure the pile inside is stocked for the night. It's only a fraction of what you wish you had, but it will have to do. The idea of running out of fuel during a cold snap is a nightmare you carry with you every day. Your fingers are numb as you stack the logs, and you curse the winter's cruel joke of making simple tasks feel like mountain climbs. You remember hearing about the medieval peasants' winter hands, fingers so cracked and raw they looked like parchment maps of frozen lands. You've seen it yourself, and it's a fate you dread. Then, the animals. You make a final round, checking that the goats and chickens are tucked in tight, their shelters lined with straw. Straw was essential. It insulated better than wood in some cases and trapped the animals' body heat. You pause at the stable, the scent of hay and animal warmth seeping through the cold air. The animals' steady breathing is a small comfort in the dark. You recall a curious medieval superstition. Placing a rabbit's foot in your pocket would bring luck against winter's hardships. You have no rabbit's foot, but the thought makes you smile. Luck might be the one thing no one can hoard or ration. Inside again, the fire is low but steady. You settle close, pulling your patchwork blanket over your knees. The flickering flames cast long shadows, making the room seem alive with gentle movement. You take stock of the day's meager meal, a small stew of root vegetables, thick and warm, enough to keep the cold from gnawing too deeply. Food is scarce, and every bite is precious. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants enjoyed any real winter holidays, or if those were just brief respites between endless work. What's clear is that celebrations, however small, brought moments of joy and hope. You think about those moments, a stolen sip of warmed cider, a shared joke by candlelight, the quiet peace after a day of survival. As the fire dies down, you listen to the wind outside, a lullaby harsh and relentless. You close your eyes, muscles aching but heart steady. Winter might freeze the world outside, but inside, you're still alive, still fighting, still surviving. Night deepens, wrapping the world in cold silence broken only by the crackle of the fire and distant howls of wolves. You lie awake, mind wandering between worry and memories, feeling the weight of winter pressing down like a heavy cloak. Your thoughts drift to clothing again, layers you add and shed like armor against the freeze. You remember how wool was prized not just for warmth, but for its magical moisture-wicking powers. Even soaked, it kept you warmer than any other fabric available. That's why it was the backbone of medieval winter wardrobes. Peasants often wore multiple layers, with homespun linen next to the skin and thick wool on top. Sometimes they'd stuff their clothing with dried grass or moss for extra insulation. It might sound odd now, but desperate times called for creative solutions. You think of the peculiar tradition of wearing a shirt inside out to ward off evil spirits or frostbite. You never took it seriously, but your grandmother swore by it, and you learned to respect those old beliefs, even if only for their comfort. Historians still debate how much superstition influenced medieval survival techniques versus practical necessity. Was magic a placebo or a real psychological shield? Maybe a little of both. As you lie there, you listen to the occasional creak of the wooden beams and the soft shuffle of family members stirring in their beds. The house breathes with you, alive in the cold. You touch the small pouch hanging around your neck, filled with dried lavender and sage, thought to repel sickness and bad luck. It smells faintly of summer, a fragrant reminder of life beyond the snow. Outside, the moon glows pale through the frost-covered window. Its light casts a silver sheen over the frozen fields, turning the snow into a vast, sparkling sea. You imagine the trees standing like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with ice, bending but unbroken. Sleep tugs at you, but before you drift off, you recall the odd medieval practice of using bear fat as a balm for cold skin. It sounds grim, but those who used it swore by its effectiveness. You smile to yourself. Survival in winter is part science, part superstition, and a whole lot of stubbornness. As the fire embers glow faintly, you let the warmth lull you into sleep, ready to face another frozen dawn. Morning creeps in again, frost etching delicate patterns on the window panes. You wake to a world muffled by snow, the landscape transformed into a silent, shimmering expanse. The cold hasn't eased, and you know today will be another test of endurance. Your breath fogs the air as you prepare for the day's first task, fetching water. The village well is frozen solid beneath a thick layer of ice. You grab a metal bucket and a sturdy stick, tapping the ice cautiously, trying not to crack the wooden bucket you've patched so many times before. Water is precious in winter, more than you realize until you have to fight for every drop. You remember the odd, medieval method of placing a pot near the fire to catch melting snow, a slow but necessary trick to keep drinking water flowing when the well refuses to cooperate. You haul the water back inside, careful not to spill a single drop. Every spill feels like a small defeat against the cold. You notice your breath catching as you enter the kitchen. The cold here is different. It's a sharp, biting chill that creeps up your spine and settles in your bones. You stoke the fire again, coaxing it back to life. Flames leap eagerly, eager to chase away the morning frost. The smell of burning wood fills the air, mingling with the faint aroma of dried herbs hung above the hearth. You remember that medieval peasants often burned herbs like rosemary and thyme, not just for fragrance, but to purify the air, a practice that may have helped keep illness at bay. Historians still argue how effective these smoke rituals actually were. Did the herbs truly kill germs, or was it mostly a psychological comfort? Either way, it added a little brightness to the bleak winter days. You take a moment to breathe in the warm, herb-scented air and sip the weak tea made from dried leaves. It's not much, but it's a small pleasure. Outside, the snow crunches underfoot as you step out to check on the root cellar. The door is iced shut, and you use all your strength to pry it open. Inside, the preserved vegetables look tired but intact, their muted colors a reminder of the summer that once was. You gather what you can, mindful that every morsel is a lifeline. The cold is relentless, but so is your determination. Every day you survive is a victory against the frozen odds. The afternoon drags on, gray and heavy, with a low-hanging sky that seems to press down on everything. You find yourself inside, mending clothes by the dim light of the hearth. Needle and thread become your weapons against the wear and tear of winter life. Your fingers fumble with thick wool, sewing patches onto old cloaks. Each stitch is a small act of defiance against the relentless cold. You think about how fabric wasn't just clothing, it was protection, identity, and survival. You've heard that peasants often recycled scraps into quilts or extra layers, a practice born of necessity but turned into art over time. Some villages even held quilting bees, turning winter into a social event, though those gatherings were rare and precious. It's funny how warmth wasn't just physical. Sharing stories, laughter, and even the occasional bit of gossip helped keep the chill at bay. You recall the quirky medieval superstition that hanging garlic by your door could ward off not just evil spirits, but also the winter sickness. You don't bother with garlic, but a sprig of rosemary sits nearby, its piney scent a tiny comfort. Historians still argue how much these superstitions were taken seriously versus how much they simply filled the gaps where medicine failed. You pause your sewing and listen to the wind howl outside, a wild, mournful sound that makes you grateful for the walls around you. Suddenly, a knock at the door breaks the monotony. It's a neighbor, bundled in layers, carrying a small basket of dried fruit and nuts, a rare treat. You exchange a few words and share a moment of warmth that no fire can replicate. Community, after all, is the real hearth of winter survival. Later, you prepare a simple supper, mixing porridge with the dried fruit. It's sweet and filling, a small luxury in the sea of scarcity. As you eat, you reflect on how medieval peasants balanced harsh reality with moments of joy, finding light in the darkest months. The stitches on your cloak grow steady, a metaphor for resilience threading through your days. And though winter's grip remains firm, inside you carry a warmth that no cold can touch. Night falls fast, and with it comes the thick, heavy silence that only deep winter can bring. You sit by the fire, feeling the last of the day's warmth seep into your bones. Outside, the snow muffles every sound, turning the world into a frozen bubble of quiet. Your thoughts wander to the tools you rely on, simple but indispensable. The flint and steel for sparks, the wooden ladles for stirring thick stews, the hand-woven baskets that carry everything from firewood to food. It's easy to forget how much of survival hinged on these small items. Losing or breaking any one of them could mean days of hardship or worse. You recall an odd tidbit you once heard. Some peasants believed that whittling small wooden charms could protect their homes from cold and misfortune. Whether charm or tool, your knife has become an extension of yourself. Precise, reliable, necessary. Historians still argue how widespread these folk practices were, or if they were just isolated quirks. But there's no denying that superstition and practicality often walked hand in hand. You glance at the family gathered around the fire, faces flushed from the heat and tired from the day's work. Despite the hardship, there's a quiet pride in their eyes, a shared understanding that this frozen season will pass. You sip a cup of weak broth, its warmth a small but vital comfort. Food might be scarce, but it's enough to keep you going. Outside, the wind rises again, rattling the shutters and sending icy fingers through the cracks in the walls. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the house settle around you. You think about the endless nights ahead and the strength you'll need to face them. It's a resilience born of necessity, and forged in the cold winter might freeze the world outside, but here, inside these walls, you find warmth in routine, community, and the quiet courage of survival. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The night deepens, and the fire's glow dims to a gentle flicker. You settle into your spot near the hearth, wrapped in layers that feel a little heavier now, as if they carry the weight of the many winters past.